My relative boasted during a family get-together, and I pilfers your work advancement by posing phony emails under your name? She chuckled and the room became quiet. You never work there again. Since HR just given me these emails from you, I gently reached out a folder and hilarious. Her grin faded as my supervisor came in behind me. Family get-togethers in my home always included love, food, and subtle rivalry. Sophia is a cousin of mine. We grew up together, attended the same colleges, and finally found ourselves in the same line of work. Same age. The sole variance is she was the preferred one every time. It made not difference what I did. At least that's how my family saw her. Smarter, more beautiful, more successful. My family was thus shocked when I secured a fantastic corporate position in Chicago last year, and they were far more surprised when I was put up for a promotion only 1 year later. I put out much effort for it. I stayed late, volunteered more, and made sure my work was the finest. Every member of my department said I was the obvious pick. One day then, my manager summoned me into his office. We have chosen to veer another way. I misunderstood it. Excellent. It dragged, but I carried on. Then I learned who was promoted. She works at my business, but I had no idea. My folks had a large family get-together last weekend. My relatives, uncles, cousins, the regular throng arrived. Since I found out Sophia had my promotion, I hadn't seen her. But she found me. Sitting at the dinner table, my aunt posed a basic inquiry. How is business? Sophia grinned and whirled the wine in her glass as if she were the damned Queen of England before I could reply. Oh, you mean my employment, she answered, her voice tinged with artificial sweetness. The one I'd taken? The crowd became quieter, although some laughed, believing she was kidding. I laughed not at all. You mean what? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She bent in just enough to let just a few of you hear. Oh, you didn't know, she giggled. I made you appear like a true horror by sending phony emails from your account to HR. Told them you were talking about resigning, bad-mouthing your employer, all sorts of crap. Presumably they wanted someone else like that running the team. She watched my response while sipping slowly at wine. I could hear my own pulse in my ears. She wanted me to show annoyance. She urged me to go off. I sighed deeply instead and grinned. See, Sophia did not know. Last week I had visited HR, and the emails had already arrived from them. I dug inside my backpack, took a red folder out, and set it on the table. Funny, I remarked, opening the first page, because HR only emailed me from you. She started to smile less. Once a calm chat, it quickly attracted the entire table. My uncle took the paperwork and wrinkled his brows. This is what is here. Glancing over the papers, he inquired. Sophia's mother leaned over his shoulder to read. Her face became twisted in perplexity. Next went my dad with the paperwork. His jaw locked as he read. It was everything there. For every bogus email, each lie, her distinct mark. Her syntax, her IP address is, she had gone wrong. Thinking it wouldn't trace it, she had sent the phony emails from her work laptop. They followed, and Mr. Callahan, my old manager, stood just behind me. Miss Sophia, he replied in a chilly, businesslike voice. Could you maybe clarify why your company-issued laptop sent these emails? None? I turned to stare at her. She stopped dead. Her hand held her wine glass slightly in motion. Hey, I am not sure what this is, she choked. This is not accurate. Mr. Callahan shook his head, sighed. Our IT division looked at it. It is very genuine. Every single email originated from your house Wi-Fi laptop, the time your work account was logged in. You hardly even tried to hide your traces. She held the tablecloth with hands. This is a mistake. No, no, no. You thought you wouldn't get detected, which was the one error I pointed out. She lost color from her face. Her father, my uncle, grabbed the docs from my dad. Tell me, Sophia, you did not do this. She says nothing. Eyes wide with terror, her mother covered her lips. Once again, Sophia's father continued, this time with greater force. She still remained silent. Callahan then let off the last bomb. Oh, and by the way, he added, taking out his phone, I captured everything you just said 1 minute ago. He set the playback to start. Her speech was crisp and clear. I forwarded phony emails from your account to HR. Made you seem to be a true horror. Lunges. Almost falling back in her chair was my aunt. Under his voice, my dad angrily cursed. My uncle got white. Sophia closed her lips as a fish opens and closes. Her brain seemed to me to be short-circuiting almost. She gasped out, staring at Callahan. You noted me. He responded, I felt you would confess to it. And right now, we have all the evidence we need. Desperate, Sophia turned to face me. Hi, she blurted. I was only joking. It was just a joke. I didn't really do it. I was just playing around with you. Not one person in the room thought her credible. Her mother broke out in tears. The face of her father became harsh. Mr. Callahan shook his head and expelled a harsh breath. You let go. Sophia looked as if she would pass out. Her eyes wide and begging, she turned to me. Kindly avoid charging fees. I'll correct it. I will resign. I will be leaving the business. One may work in this field. I reclined, acting to consider it. Oh, you are absolutely quitting, I remarked. Still, my mood will determine whether or not I charge. The space became crazy. Her father exclaimed. Her mother let out a cry. The lawyer uncle began discussing how many laws she had lately broken. Shock immobilized Sophia as she sat there. I said nothing, just seeing her universe fall apart. She wasn't the favorite anymore, first of all in my life. Painted like a ghost, Sophia sat there clutching the table as if it were the only thing preventing her from toppling down. Her father, Uncle David, was still sifting through the emails, his hands quivering with rage. You know what you have done? At last he said, his voice shockingly quiet. Sophia took a strong gulp. Dad, I simply shut down. No. He jerked and dropped the papers. You really do not know how unlawful this is? Fraud in identity, corporate sabotage, slander. My aunt sobbed chokedly, clutching her chest as if she may pass out. The rest of the family simply sat there, astonished, eyes flying between Sophia and the devastation she had created. Suddenly, you cannot verify it was me. Her voice was low, yet the words exploded into the room. All stopped. Blinking, I hardly understood what I had just heard. Excuse me? Mr. Callahan arched an eyebrow. Sophia inhaled deeply, straightened herself, and somewhat restored her composure. You write emails. All right, but that does not indicate that I submitted them. Someone could have used my laptop. Alternatively, IT may have made a mistake. Or, Sophia, her mother murmured for God's sake, but she persisted. You mentioned having my IP address. Someone else wasn't utilizing my Wi-Fi. Who's to say? You cannot substantiate my physical typing of those emails. I never signed anything. I never labeled it with my name. Hard evidence is lacking here. Disgusted, I fixed her eyes. She was already attempting to slink her way out, knowing she was trapped. Callahan raised his head in delight. You do know that our IT division records keystrokes? Said he was. Sophia gasped. He went on. They noted the precise times and locations of every email sent. Even a screen capture of you inputting some of them exists. Quietness. Perfect quiet. Sophia seemed really terrified for the first time all night. She then tightened her jaw and carried out the one action she knew how to accomplish. She focused twice. The harassment here is, she's obese. Everybody is ganging up on me. This relates not even to the employment. You just want to embarrass me. Desperate, she resorted to her parents. Mom and Dad, are you really allowing them to treat me this way? Like some lawbreakers? Uncle David gave his head shake. You're a criminal? Her expression became shocked, as if it were just now sinking in that her own father disagreed with her. Her brother, my cousin Ethan, at last spoke out at that point. You always do this, Sophia mumbled. She turned her back on him. What the devil is meant to mean? Ethan laughed and leaned back in his chair. You behave as if you are above everything. You lie, cheat, undermine others, and act the victim when you're caught. Her crimson face turned on me. You do, but I do not. He interferes. You think we forget what you did to Rachel? Alternatively, how you pilfers Taylor's internship? This is something you do constantly. Our cousin Rachel slid uneasily in her seat. Our other cousin Taylor only shook his head. Looking at her daughter like she was seeing her for the first time, Sophia's mother wiped her tears. Oh my gosh, she said quietly. You did indeed do this. Sophia clenched her teeth, her gaze darting across the room searching for someone, anybody, to ally her. Nobody accomplished. She made her worst mistake at that point. She sought to turn it on me. She growled, You set me up. You merely wanted retribution since I landed the job. I gave a chuckle, actually laughed. You agreed, Sophia, I reminded her, said aloud, in front of all of us. Her gaze darted to Callahan's phone still in his palm. She snapped, and that recording is unlawful. It cannot be used by you. Callahan arched an eyebrow. Actually, he responded, it's very legal in Illinois to document talks you participate in. Still, good effort. She let out a hard swallow. Her mother held her face between her hands. Her father worked on his temples. And then, just when I felt things couldn't get worse, my uncle got up slowly. We need to discuss, he said. Not number. But he was not speaking with Sophia. He was in conversation with me. My gut collapsed. Just what? I inquired, startled. He indicated for me to follow him into the next room. I stumbled. Callahan nodded gently as if to say, go on. Rising, I followed my uncle into my dad's office. Behind us, he closed the door. He merely stood there, stroking his brow as if he were trying to pick his words precisely. He responded at last. I need you to let this go. IBL blinked. Correct me? Excuse me. He gave a sigh. Sophia was incorrect, listen. I are aware of that. But urgent bills suing someone, it will destroy her life. I looked at him just now. She aimed to mess with Mai. He let out a strong breath, squeezing his nose's bridge. Exactly. But this will wreck our family. Your aunt already lives in chaos. Should this get public, it will be embarrassing. You won, all right? She failed. Simply let it pass. What I was hearing defied belief. Are you asking me to discontinue this? I said, my voice growing. He continued, his voice stern. I'm asking you to. I closed my fists. If I were the one who done it, would you be saying this? He flicked, but did not reply. That supplied everything I needed to know. I inhaled deeply, attempting to retain a steady voice. Given that you are a lawyer, I stated. He nodded subtly. Then you are very well aware that actions have consequences. His jaw closed. This goes beyond Sophia, he mumbled. Who then is it concerning? He stopped. Eventually, however, it comes to your aunt last. Freeze. Exactly what? He ran a hand through his hair and looked worn out right away. He acknowledged she is unwell. She hasn't yet shared this with anybody. Last month, we just learned about it. The earth had seemed to have been pulled from beneath me. Unwell, how? His voice hardly rose beyond a whisper. Breast cancer. I drew in a quick gasp. She's already breaking down, he said. Should this go to court and Sophia be arrested, I'm not sure if she could cope. I only need you to consider it. Heart pumping, I stood there, thoughts flying. The strategy did not include this. I was perfectly entitled to pursue Sophia. Now, however, if I did, it may ruin my aunt's life. And that evening, for the first time, I had nowhere to turn. Standing in my dad's office, I stared at my uncle as if I had just been brutally punched. For breast cancer, I said again, my voice just above a whisper. Uncle David nodded, his face worn with tiredness. She wants no one else to know just now. Although Sophia is about to begin therapy, should things get out of hand and Sophia be jailed, she might go over the brink. My mind was whirling. I was in charge minutes ago. I only had one. Now? I was now being urged to leave. To clear the individual who turned on me off the record. To save the same family who supported her and helped her flee with years of worth of evidence. I closed my hands. You are telling me to just ignore this happened? I spoke. I want you to consider your aunt. He corrected. And for me as well? I fired back. She aimed to end my career. She took great satisfaction in it. Uncle David sighs. I know. He spoke as such. I despise what she did as well. But should this go to court, it won't just damage Sophia. It will wipe out your aunt. I inhaled shakily as my thoughts flew. This sounded just like my family. Underline items on the rug with sweeping. Defend the golden kid. I yearned to yell. I had wanted to say no. A knock on the door followed as well. Both of us spun as it gently opened, and Sophia stood there with pale cheeks and wide-open eyes. You are lying, she said softly. Her voice was not loud. She seemed honestly vulnerable for the first time all night. You are inventing that to get me out of this. Uncle David turned to face her. I wish I were, he whispered softly. She swallowed hard and entered the office, her customary conceit totally gone. Mom questioned, voice quivering, very unwell. Uncle David said she didn't want to inform you until after therapy began. Sophia began to feel her hands shaking. I observed her intently. Was this authentic? Alternatively, was it yet another act? Her face then turned to become really hostile. You are to blame here, she spat right at me. You simply had to mention this during a family get-together. You might have managed this discreetly. No, you had to embarrass me, worry Mother out. And now you're threatening to put me to jail? I giggled too. Are you right now really serious? I started to snap. You engaged in this with yourself. I did not press you to forward those emails. I did not induce your lying, and I sure as hell never made you boast about it in front of everyone. Sophia's hands came together into fists. If you go through with this, Mom's life will be destroyed. She was defensive. Rest once more. But this time I could see something else on her face. One is in panic. Not limited just to our aunt. Anything else. And then it dawned on me she was covering something. You're afraid? I replied gently, watching her response. Sophia's gaze veered aside. She said, I'm not sure what you're talking about. Uncle David crossed his eyebrows. Sophia, he remarked in a firm voice. She crossed her arms, shifting uneasily. She replied, This already is terrible enough. Could we just drop it and go on? Her manner of phrasing things, her voice seemed urgent. Something didn't seem correct. I came forward. And what else did you do? I queried. Her head swung up. Nothing, she answered too fast. Uncle David focused his gaze narrow-wise. Sophia, he went on. She nibbled her lip. I could almost see her weighing whether or not to be honest. She blurted then, Not just you. Freeze. What exactly? She gasped loudly away from my eyes. I too done it to other people, okay? She murmured. I started to feel my gut slump. Additional people? Who? She closes her eyes. Not sure, colleagues. Other applicants. I emailed HR fictitious complaints about them. I sometimes applied many accounts. On occasion, I bad-mouthing the firm by sending emails posing as them. Not just you, but also others. It was anyone I felt may surpass me. My breath hung in my throat. Oh my gosh, Uncle David murmured. This covered more than just myself. Sophia developed a pattern. A background. How many people? My voice shockingly calm as I asked. She paused. 4, 5, perhaps 6, she uttered a faint reply. I almost let out a yell. You probably destroyed at least 6 people's jobs. She staggered. I, too, didn't see it getting this far. I thought. I put out a hand to shut her off. I needed a second to sort through this. It was no longer just my payback now. It concerned more than just myself. Others existed. And suppose I let her go right now. She may do it once more. Uncle David ran a wobbly hand over his face. Jesus Christ, Sophia, he said quietly. She let out a strong gulp. I can correct it, she whispered. Just kindly avoid showing the police. I'll stop. Sorry. I'll do anything you desire. I gazed at her. After everything, after all the lies, the gaslighting, the hubris, she still felt she could manage her way out. And suddenly, a horrible notion struck me. Does Mom know? I asked. Her face drained of color. What? I narrowed my eyes. Does your mother know what you've done? Or has she been protecting you this entire time? Believing you're innocent? Sophia bit her lip. That was all I needed. I turned to Uncle David. She has to know, I said. He hesitated but nodded. I'll tell her, he replied gently. Sophia grabbed his arm. Dad, please, she implored. You don't have to, don't, he replied fiercely, shaking her off. You've lied enough tonight. Tears flooded her eyes. For the first time, actual dread crossed her face. Her mother, the one person who always protected her, was going to find out everything. I stood there, pulse racing, head whirling. This wasn't simply about getting retribution anymore. This was larger. Sophia has damaged many people's careers. If I kept quiet, more people may be injured. But if I pushed ahead, it would ruin my family. And worst of all, my aunt, who was ailing, would be caught in the thick of it all. I took a long breath, locking eyes with Sophia. You deserve to go to prison, I replied. She swallowed heavily. But now, I have to decide whether I want to be the one to place you there. Her breath hitched. Uncle David breathed heavily. And at that instant, I knew whatever I chose next would alter everything. Silence stretched between us like a rubber band squeezed too tight, ready to shatter at the slightest movement. Sophia's face was pale, her hands trembling. Uncle David looked fatigued. His fingers pinched his temple like he was trying to fight away a headache. I could feel my own heart thumping. I had never been in this situation before. I had never had this much control over someone, particularly her. "What are you going to do?" Sophia murmured. I didn't respond immediately away, because I didn't know. I wanted justice. I wanted every individual she had sabotaged to know the truth. But was I ready to see my family break apart in the process? Would my aunt endure it? Would I? Before I could say anything, the door abruptly flung open. And there she was, Sophia's mother, my aunt. She had been weeping. Her eyes were puffy and red, her hands quivering at her sides. But the minute she glanced at Sophia, her face was inscrutable. "Mom!" Sophia murmured, her voice breaking. Not a word," my aunt murmured, her voice husky. Sophia's lips jerked shut. And then my aunt turned to me. "Is it true?" she inquired, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded. Her lips squeezed together, and she let out a deep, trembling breath. "And you were planning to pursue charges?" Another nod. She closed her eyes for a long period. Then she glanced at Sophia again and stated the one thing no one in the family had ever dared to speak to her. "You detest me." Sophia flinched as if she had been physically struck. "Mom, please," she pleaded, reaching out. My aunt pulled away like Sophia's touch would burn her. "Don't," she said sternly. "Don't you dare attempt to play the victim. Not after all you've done." Sophia's breathing grew raspy, terrified. I thought I was attempting to what, Sophia?" My aunt snapped, eyes burning with rage. "To go ahead? To damage other people just so you might feel better about yourself?" Sophia's lower lip twitched. "I didn't believe it would become this terrible. You didn't think at all," my aunt yelled. I had never heard her shout before. The entire house had gone silent. Everyone was listening. My uncle wiped his face with both hands. "She confessed there were others," he murmured. My aunt's head jerked toward him. "Others?" Her voice was deadly quiet. "She done this to several individuals," I said. "I wasn't the first. I wouldn't have been the last." My aunt's whole body tensed. Then, gently, she turned back to Sophia. "You're a monster," she whispered. Sophia let out a choked sob. "No, Mama, please, shut up." Another wave of quiet slammed over the room. Tears poured down Sophia's cheeks. "Mom, I'm sorry, No, you're not," my aunt interjected, voice chilly. "You're sorry because you got caught." Sophia shook her head wildly. "I can repair this." "How?" my aunt snapped. "Tell me, Sophia, how do you repair this? Do you give these individuals back their jobs? Do you erase the harm you've done?" Sophia's mouth opened, but nothing came out, because there was no way to mend it. My aunt covered her face, shoulders shaking. "I reared a fraud," she muttered. Sophia let out a broken sob. "Mom, please don't say that." My aunt dropped her hands. "You did this on yourself," she replied. "I spent my whole life defending you, making excuses for you. And this entire time you've been lying. You've been destroying people." Sophia turned to my uncle. "Dad, please tell her I have nothing to say to you," he murmured, unwilling to look at her. Sophia let out a choked noise. She had never been neglected like this before. Never been abandoned, never been really alone. But she was now, and she knew it. Sophia dried her eyes, taking long, unsteady breaths. "I'll make this right," she whispered, voice quivering. I crossed my arms. "How?" She didn't answer. She didn't have a response. Because there was no way out of this. I breathed sharply. "I'm pursuing charges," I eventually said. Sophia let out a quick gasp, her whole body tightening. "No," she whimpered. "Please, no." I turned to my aunt. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. I felt sad for her, but not for Sophia. My aunt breathed out a trembling breath and gave me a nod. "Do what you have to do," she whispered quietly. Sophia began weeping again. "Mom, don't allow her. I can't rescue you from this," my aunt said. "Not this time." Sophia looked like she wanted to shout, like she wants to flee, but there was nowhere left to go. Sophia was arrested 2 weeks later. She was charged with identity fraud, business sabotage, and slander. Her firm sued her for damages. She lost everything. No one in the family protected her. Not her parents. Not her brother. Not even my grandparents. The Golden Kid has finally fallen. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being encouraged to strive harder. I had won. Not just the vengeance, but my freedom. And man, that felt amazing.